An air of anticipation hung over the great metropolis like a cloud of hemp smoke. The capital city of Kru nation, equally well known as Nagpur, city of snakes, and Hastinapur, city of elephants, waited with bated breath. The royal carriers had gone about the city the night before, calling out the news that Dowager Queen Satyavati, widow of Raja Santanu, late king of Hastinapur and lord of the Kuru Bharat nation, would appear before the royal assembly at the auspicious hour recommended by the prospectors to issue an important announcement. One day they had all been waiting to hear for over a year. The city generally lined the avenues and roadways, sat atop rooftops and under catchments, filling up every dusty field, every mud tracked roadway, and every byway. Children sat on their father's shoulders or on their mothers' hips. Merchants and traders, hunters and farmers, Brahmins and soldiers all stood jostling one another. Hundreds of thousands of souls waited eagerly to hear the royal proclamation. Runners awaited the reins of their mounts held in hand, ready to ride for their own capital cities. For its implications would change not only the course of their tribe's history but their nation's politics as well. Inside the magnificent palace stronghold, the great Sabha hall was thronged from wall to wall with kings, princesses, ministers, and merchant lords, preceptors and traders, as well as ambassadors from a score of distant foreign lands. Even the sentries posted at each of the 108 pillars of Great Wall was pressed back against the cold stone by the immense crowd. The influence of Kuru Bharat kingdom extended across the nations of the world. Traders and priests crossed oceans and deserts, mountain ranges and war-torn regions to travel here to the heart of the great land of five rivers, known to many still by its ancient name of Jammu Dvipa, land of the jamun tree. The dark blue fruit with its sticky sweet juice was only one of the many exotic items of produce, craft and manufacture that were found in this great subcontinent and nowhere else in the known world. There are ambassadors with complexions darker than Satyavati herself. There are pale-skinned foreigners with yellow hair, with strange grab and tongues, men from the Kathi lands with long moustaches and drooping eyelids and allies, tributes, and even royal visitors from distant foreign lands. Some of these foreigners were of dubious loyalty. A few had warned, allied against, or otherwise opposed the expansion and growth of the Kuru Bharat race. At least one or more had ancestors who had perished in the legendary Battle of 10 Kings on the Prussian plain. King Sudas of Trasu Bharatas had won a great victory against a far superior force led by 10 rival kings. Former enemies or past rivals or present now saw fit to bow their coiffured heads to the power and might of the Kuru throne. There were no hidden daggers tipped with poison for the descendants of Bharat Sudas, only rich tributes and priceless treasures waiting to be gifted as tokens of humility and acknowledgement of the sovereignty of the Kuru dynasty. For while the hot For while the house of Bharat had grown and prospered greatly these past generations, in the past decade or Two, under the legendary steward Bhishma, it was no longer merely a kingdom or even a nation. It had now become a formidable empire, a sheer mass of power and wealth and influence centered upon this single keep rivaled the greatest empires of distant continents. What happened here affected the world. The problem of progeny that had plagued the ruling dynasty was well known to all who followed the politics of kingship. If talk of enormous activity is a favorite pastime of all men and women, then talk to the amorous activities of royalty occupies a special position. For in an age where all news and learning was through spoken words, the whispered accounts of what royal did in private and how they did it, it was a great source of entertainment. And as the wisest bards demonstrated daily, entertainment was the best form of passing an information. Even the great Vedas, annals of the greatest kingdom known to civilized mortal kind, were told in the form of katha or story, and the story of the problem of progeny faced by the house of Kuru Bharat was one that had been told and retold infinite times by infinite retailers across the known world, for by such means was information conveyed in a ages past, news related, itihas scribed, and history recorded. It was a thrust for knowing which brought this vast gathering here today to throng the streets and rooftops and bridges and culverts and river banks and rajmargs and avenues and alleywage of Hastinapur city, and which crowded hundreds of overdressed, overjeweled, and overweight nobles and diplomats into the Sabha hall. The crowd had grown restless, the gossip more spirited when the tall, dark, and stately form of Queen Satyavati appeared upon the dais of the Sabha hall. Her appearance was met with instant silence as every pair of eyes turned to her. Lips silenced themselves and ears awaited her proclamation. She began with a customary homage, made the usual ritual declaration, and honored the ancestors, gods, and all those required to be acknowledged by tradition. When all the formalities were over, she came to the nub of the matter. Not one to waste breath, knowing she already had a captive audience eager to receive her words. She glanced once, briefly but notably, at the towering form of Bhishma, who stood in full court armor, gleaming and resplendent, the most magnificent specimen of manhood in the entire assemblance, a symbol of power of the entire Kuru Bharat nation and pillar of the very structure that held her aloft. He acknowledged her with a glance that revealed nothing but a son's respect and a younger's humility. Through he was almost as young as she and far, far more powerful than she could ever be 1,000 lifetimes. Yet his suitable gesture was significant, intended as a message to all who observed them. This unlikely duo of stepmother and stepson, for it was by Bhishma leave that she ruled Hastinapur, and though Bhishma's power and influence and reach that she maintained that post. The brief exchange of glances had been sufficient to convey to the world at large that all was well between the dowager king widow and her stepson, the steward and regent of Kuru Empire. All was well, and as it had been since Santanu's demise, nothing had changed in the power equation here. 1,000 beggars collapsed on that look alone. 1,000 fortunes were won, and 1,000 lost because of that sideward glance and subtle nod of acknowledgement. A dozen national histories would be rewritten because of the strength and unity displayed in the casual look. Kuru Jungle was exchanged the immutable Let no one doubt or question that status quo, even or pain of death. Her message conveyed. Satyavati came directly to the proclamation that all were waiting to receive. It is a great day for the Kuru dynasty, a great day for Hastinapur and Kuru Jangala, the dawn of a new epoch. She said with her regal tone and manners that belied her origins as a fisherman's daughter who had spent her youth faring pilgrims across the Ganga, clad in scanty garb and stinking of fish. Now, as she stood before the awe-struck eyes of the nobility, dignitaries, and commoners, she was the very image of what a king